Liberty. That's a concept effectively outlined by Thomas Jefferson in our Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Every school child has learned this in America. It simply means three things. 1, there is a God, or Creator if you choose. 2, that God has given us rights that can't be taken away. 3, the purpose of government is not to take away our rights, but to protect those rights. That's pretty simple. The opposite of freedom is tyranny. And many of us got involved in politics back in the early 1980s because we feared communism, which was the opposite of liberty and the very embodiment of tyranny opposed by our founding fathers. There was no God, no inalienable rights, and a total and unaccountable government. What frightened us about communism? We feared the total government of the system and the complete violation of inalienable rights. Communist states held a common pattern wherever they existed, even if they never brought about the communism promised by Karl Marx. They always had the citizenry under surveillance. The government could take someone into custody and disappear them into a system of secret prisons called the gulags, where they would never receive a trial, where they would officially not exist, where they could be tortured and even killed without consequence to the jailer. That's what scared us. My friends, in America today, every one of the Founding Fathers' precepts have been explicitly rejected by the Bush administration, and every one of the communist regime's practices I just outlined have been explicitly endorsed by the Bush administration in open legal briefs and practiced by them. The chief difference being, the Bush administration is not practicing them quite as widely as the communists did. Not yet, anyway. Let me repeat that. Every one of those things I just described about the old Soviet Union has been more or less openly promoted by the United States under the Bush regime, often in open court. And the Bush regime has practiced these things, every one of them. Now, I'm not going to accuse President Bush of being a communist. I don't even think Karl Marx was a real communist. And I realize I've said something shocking, but let's review the evidence and you decide for yourself. Let's start with surveillance. The Fourth Amendment is a simple amendment which simply reads, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, or persons or things to be seized. The Fourth Amendment simply says we can't conduct a search without 4 criteria. 1, you must have a probable cause, meaning more than a 50% chance that a crime has been committed. 2, you must have a warrant from an independent judge. 3, the warrant must be supported by an oath. And 4, the warrant has to be specific about what is being searched and what is being searched for, and cannot simply be a search warrant for everything or anything. If you have all of these 4 criteria satisfied, then the search is constitutionally reasonable and can be conducted. But the Bush administration says that the president can conduct any search they find, quote, reasonable. What's an unreasonable search? It's a search the president doesn't want to conduct, I suppose. All that the Bush administration has to do is follow the same Constitution he swore an oath to preserve, protect, and defend by seeking a warrant. There's even an emergency provision in the FISA law that lets the president tap a phone call before getting a warrant, which is similar to the common law doctrine of hot pursuit with regard to warrants. All the president has to do is get a warrant within 72 hours after conducting the phone tap, so it doesn't slow down the NSA one bit to get the warrant. Unless, of course, the NSA request for a warrant would be denied by courts. If NSA searches don't involve probable cause, then they would be denied a warrant. If they are tapping Americans' phone calls under this warrantless program, they are tapping the phones of people who, by definition, are probably not terrorists. Thus, the most appropriate name for the program is not the terrorist surveillance program, but the probably not a terrorist surveillance program. Note that the president no longer talks about warrants, although he told the American people many times that he would not conduct a search without a warrant, such as this quote.
Now, by the way, anytime you hear the United States government talking about wiretap, a wiretap requires a court order. Nothing has changed, by the way. When we're talking about chasing down terrorists, we're talking about getting a court order before we do so. It's important for our fellow citizens to understand, when you think Patriot Act, constitutional guarantees are in place when it comes to doing what is necessary to protect our homeland, because we value the Constitution.
Law enforcement officers need a federal judge's permission to wiretap a foreign terrorist phone, or to track his calls, or to search his property.
And by the way, everything you hear about requires court order. It requires there to be permission from a FISA court, for example.
Under the Act, law enforcement officers need a federal judge's permission to wiretap a foreign terrorist phone or search his property.
That's a nice way of saying that the president, who parades around in public as a professing Christian, is a bold-faced liar. Thou shalt not bear false witness is a commandment he boldly and proudly violates. Think of that the next time you hear him say he's a Christian. The word warrant is no longer in the administration's vocabulary when discussing the NSA. Today, the administration taps millions of phone calls every year without a warrant, without probable cause. And they are copying down and archiving every American's phone habits, the number of calls, the length of calls, who you are calling, in a permanent database at the NSA. In effect, they are tapping the phones and monitoring the internet traffic of people who are probably not terrorists. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to realize that this is a poor use of government resources. You don't fight terrorism by tapping my grandmother's fourth phone call this week to her friend down the street to confirm the time of the bridge club meeting. Nor is our country safer by finding out how many email spam messages I got asking me to buy Viagra, invest in a stock, or my 1,000th reminder that I won the United Kingdom's national lottery. They don't make us safer, but these programs do tell us who the Bush administration is focusing upon as the real enemy. It's not the foreign-born Arab terrorists, every one of which the 9/11 hijackers were. They're not closing our borders. No, you are the enemy. President Bush has decided that the terrorists hate us for our freedom, and he's doing his best to take away their reason for hating us. But that's just surveillance. And you haven't done anything wrong. You're innocent. So you have nothing to fear, right? It's not like they'd lock you up without a trial. They couldn't do that. That's what other innocent people thought. Wrongly.